Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Product podcast. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky, and I'm your host. Today, we'll be talking about cancer, a disease that affects so many of us, and how technology can reduce some of the stress to both patients and their loved ones. Based on the National Cancer Institute, in 2022, there were almost 20 million new cancer cases worldwide. And by 2040, the number of new cases per year is expected to rise to almost 30 million. Our guest today is building a company with a vision to help cancer patients and their caregivers throughout those challenging times. I'm happy to have with me Thomas Fletcher, co-founder and CTO of Leynek Medical. Leynek Medical's first product is ReneCare, a platform that helps cancer patients capture their symptoms and journal their experiences between appointments, receive custom guidance from those observations, and share that information with caregivers to receive help in a timely fashion. In their journey so far, Leynek Medical are Invest Ottawa Ignition Award winners and Ted Rogers Echo Program finalist. Welcome to the podcast, Thomas.
Thank you, Masha. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And this is such an important area of product and technology that you're in that I'm sure is already helping a lot of people.
Yeah, it is an exciting and sort of very rewarding space to be developing a technology product in.
Yeah.
It's something that we've been evolving for the last year or so, and has actually just we were happy to get the platform onto the app stores May June this year. So it's actually already started to kind of percolate its way into people's hands.
Yeah. We'll dive into how you started it and the story behind it. But I think many of our listeners will have some touch to this. I don't know. I don't want to call it a pandemic because we know it's not transferred like a pandemic
Yes.
after the last one we experienced. But still, it's affecting everyone. Me personally, my mother, she is a cancer survivor, and just now my sister have been diagnosed, so I'm living through it right now.
Yeah.
And they're both in Israel, and I'm in Canada. So this remoteness is also very, very stressful.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, it's such a large body of people who are affected that
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to find someone in your network of friends or family that has been affected at one time or another.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem. And as we talk about sort of the platform and kind of how we evolved it, I think we're taking a bit of a novel approach to. I mean, obviously, we're not solving the problem of cancer. What we're really doing is focusing on the patient journey and
Mhm.
making sure that we can do what we can with technology to help ease their burden a little bit, and help them manage the situation a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did it all started?
So I mean, I guess the first thing that maybe is important to get on the table is I'm not a doctor, and neither is my co-founder Will. We're both engineers, and like you, we both had family members go through a cancer diagnosis, and different experiences. But there were a lot of sort of resonant pieces that came out. The first thing is that it's overwhelming, right?
Mhm.
It's overwhelming for the person who's being diagnosed. It's overwhelming for the family members and any loved ones who are close to that person. It's an enormous amount of information that you're asked to digest,
Mhm.
and ultimately the challenge is one of kind of project management. Is that the patient is being
Mhm.
asked to all of a sudden become an expert in cancer, learn a lot about it, manage their situation, manage appointments, and at the same time you have everybody who's asking them to be involved, right? How are you doing? Is when we talk to patients, that is the question that is it's a great question, and it's the question that they hate to receive,
Mhm.
because there's no good answer to that, and it's very repetitive. So that was our experience. We sort of got into this because of family members and our own experiences, and seeing that there's probably a technology way to ease this burden a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I can only think about the last week. As I mentioned, my sister was diagnosed a week ago,
Yeah.
and just the amount of question that I had, and just myself, and she has limited time and energy to actually uh,
Absolutely.
deal with answering all of those questions. So I wasn't even bothering her with that. But there are so many types of just the specific cancer that she has, and there are so
Yep.
many things that, and then you are looking for, okay, so what is new out there for treatment, and can we find something that will help her, that is better than what exists out there. And
Yeah.
there is so much going on out there.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what happens, right? You get into this tailspin of what can I do to help you? What can I do to, sort of like to solve your problem, right? And
Mhm.
I mean that resonates with me. I'm an engineer. I solve problems. That's
Yeah,
it's what most engineers love to do is, when presented with a problem,
yeah,
it's not so much empathy, it's well, how do we fix that, right? And
absolutely.
that, like that is sort of, kind of I would say our initial approach to when we're seeing that, when a patient comes in, you don't really know what's going to come down the road for them, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when they come in for their first, sort of assessments, they're given a lot of information, typically in paper format, pamphlets and sort of contacts, phone numbers, because the clinics, the oncology programs can't
Hmm.
predict what is going to come with a patient. So they're
Mm.
giving them an enormous amount of information, trying to, sort of forestall this panic. But what it really does is it actually induces a different kind of panic, because now, you're reading all these pamphlets if you're
Mhm.
diligent, and you're
Mhm.
reading about pain, you're reading about cardiotoxicity, you're reading about, sort of diarrhea and, all of these situations, and you're like, well, which of these is going to affect me? Are they
Right.
all going to affect me?
Right.
Um, Maybe none of them will. It really depends on, sort of like
Mm.
you said, the diagnosis, the treatment schedule, the regimen. It's a very it's kind of a murky place to be from an
Mhm.
information perspective from a patient.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first product, and you mentioned you released it in early summer, is ReneCare.
Yes.
Where does the name come from? Is it named after someone?
So it's Rene Leynek, and actually
Ah,
Leynek Medical is the name of the company. So there's sort of a tie in there,
I see.
and the story there is Rene Leynek is I mean, among other things, he is the inventor of the stethoscope. And
Hmm.
so part of our journey when we started was this focus on some medical research that talked about, being able to do remote monitoring and symptom management of patients on a regular basis. And if
Hmm.
you did that, took your temperature, took a bunch of, sort of physiological data, blood pressure, and then married that with patient reported symptom observations in terms of, your pain, your nausea levels, whether you're sleeping or not. You took
Hmm.
those things and you married them together and you monitored them, that you were able to prevent, sort of emergency room visits. You were able to prevent, sort of your situation from spiraling out of control,
Hmm.
which makes sense, right?
Hmm.
If you
Yeah.
watch something, you can act on it as soon as it starts trending negative.
It does
So
resonate to us as engineers. When we develop software, that's what we want to do. We
that's
want to
right.
see exactly how the software works so we can prevent issues. So
Yeah,
why not apply to cancer patients? That makes a lot
that's
of
right.
sense.
Yeah. So what we did was we built a device initially. That was sort of the start of the company. Was to build this prototype device to do an all-in-one measurement. Sort of for blood pressure, heart rate. We had we have an ECG. Which is being built into it, and it had included a stethoscope. Right. So that's
Mhm.
where the name came from. Is when we had to, sort of name the software part of the platform. We were like, well, what are we going to call it? Well,
Right,
we already have Leynek in the company name. Why don't we go with Rene? So it became
right.
ReneCare. Yeah.
So what does ReneCare does?
So what ReneCare is right now, and I'll talk about it. Sort of we can talk about it aspirationally, where it's going and what it is today. Um, Today, it's a patient management platform. So it allows patients to manage their health status
Mhm.
through the concept of just keeping a daily journal. Right. By doing a
Mhm.
daily check-in, sort of 20 seconds every day, you use a standard symptom scale to monitor your pain, nausea, sleep, anxiety levels,
Mhm.
to correlate, information about your mood, and then a journaling entry. So
Mhm.
the journaling entry is actually particularly important. Um, it gives context to all these other observations that you're putting in. Why are you
Mm-hmm.
anxious? Well, I'm anxious because my nephew got into a car accident, so nothing to do with perhaps my
Right.
my condition.
Right.
Something else was going on in my life.
Yeah.
So you do this every day, and then what we can do is the platform allows you to generate a health score out of that. So now you've got a digital record, you've got these
Mm-hmm.
patient observations, which are the medical data,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got this free-form journal, which represents a huge amount of context information that we can use to, sort of determine your overall trend, right? Your health trend, positive or negative.
I
This
see.
is sort of, this is the data capture part of what the platform does for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is different from your traditional model of, an oncology department. When you talk to your physician, they're going to say, well, I'd like you to track some symptoms, and they're going to tell you which symptoms they'd like you to track because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to align with, your treatment. And then they'll generally say, well, we'd like you to just sort of journal, like sort of what's going on and how you're feeling. But that's all done today with pen and paper typically, right?
Mm.
And then that information, when it comes back to the appointment, in your 3-week cadence, you come back to the appointments after 3 weeks of capturing this information, and not much is done with it. You're going to have a conversation about the here and now, and that's typically the way physicians that we've talked
Mm.
to like to work, is that they're worried about how you're feeling in the moment.
I see.
Um, and what this gives us is that bridge between moments, right? So physicians can incorporate that as part of their kind of diagnostic tool.
I see. I see. I can also see how information like that can go way beyond that into research. Because
Yeah,
once you have a lot of patients with maybe similar type of cancers or just in general, you can maybe already get some insights from that data and show researchers in that area. This is maybe what might affect someone's in this situation, like you're saying, the stress or the
yeah.
context of the stress. So if they can reduce the stress because of external reasons and it does help them heal better, maybe there is some correlation over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's various different types of platforms, and you see a lot of this, sort of in drug evaluations, where the drug companies will, during a sort of an evaluation and as a trial, they'll have patients come in and they'll do a bunch of physiological tests on those patients as they're going through a trial,
Yeah,
to determine, they need the record,
yeah,
and they'll do the patient observations, right, as well.
yeah.
There's a massive inconvenience for those patients to have to come into a clinic to gather this information. So this is our platform we see is potentially valuable for future drug development companies as well, right? Being able to
Absolutely.
leverage this type of sort of engagement.
Yeah, this can be huge. My mom, when she was treated, she was in a study.
Yeah.
And I know, well, she needed to go many times to do scans. So for
Hmm.
the scans, you can do it from home. Maybe
Yes.
one day, who knows? But but
Yeah.
I'm sure I wasn't there to follow exactly her process and journey.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they ask her a lot of questions about how she feels and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I can see how this from the mind of a product manager, I'm thinking about self-serve. You're
Yeah.
self-serving the researchers by
Yeah.
giving this to the hands of the patients and doing it
Yeah.
where they are, and they don't need to, like you said, come to their office.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when you think about that. I mean, we're not doing something new and novel here in that capacity. The idea of, sort of having people fill out surveys, as part of, a drug trial, or, patients doing the symptom assessments as they come into a clinic, for their appointments. These are all being done today. This is, kind of not net new. What's interesting is when you start applying that at a higher cadence and you're actually able to monitor it, sort of more frequently. This is where there's been some great research that's shown that, for patients, if you can do this monitoring of these observations more frequently and you can act on it, in cohorts of 20, 50, 100 patients, it's actually proved to be really beneficial. Now, how do you incorporate that into a system that's already overloaded, right? You can't ask physicians to, clinicians, nurse navigators to take on this additional burden the way that it's being done today. And this is where, sort of the platform and the technology, I think, comes in, because once you have a digital record, now you can start applying all sorts of interesting digital transformation and digital tools into this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know how when you ask a person after a few days, what happened a few days ago,
Yeah,
it's not always the same memory as on the day. So,
absolutely,
so it's
absolutely.
always really important to capture it as we go rather than as time
Yeah,
goes by. You also have a feature over there that they can ask questions, because we always have a lot of questions and stuff like
yeah,
that. And I believe also they can invite their family into the platform to be almost like a group, a support group, and ask their own questions and then get those answers. Is this done with AI, or is this goes to the physician and the physician answer all those questions?
so it's a little bit of both, right?
Mm.
I guess, for context, the idea here, right, of the platform is not just to be another survey tool, right? Is
Mhm.
not just to be a survey tool that, goes out to patients and, they fill
Right.
it in, and whether it's daily or not.
Right.
um, you want them to remain engaged, because the value of the data comes from having consistency and sort of good fidelity on that data.
Hmm.
And so how do you do that? You do that through engagement. And that's part of why, after talking to patients, we talked about, what matters most to you? How can we relieve your burden? And they talk about, well, I've got this network of friends and family who, while they're here to support me, it's a bit of a burden to actually keep them all informed, right?
Yes.
And it's a bit of a burden to keep them in. So while they're important, and that support network is fantastic and is actually very important in your healing journey,
Hmm.
it can be difficult to sort of manage, sort of in our traditional sense of, like, everybody calls me and asks me how I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like you said, this platform allows us to kind of keep your, sort of, a patient can invite who they want to participate.
Yeah.
And then they can, with that invitation, give them the ability to start participating in things like appointments, right?
Yeah.
Give them the ability to start participating in, their symptom observations, right? Because the way I see you and the way you see you may be very different.
Hmm.
And, there's value in both of those, sort of contexts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where, when we get into sort of, what can we do with this digital data, this AI piece comes in, because now what we can do is we can actually take all those observations, all those daily summaries, which are very difficult for a physician, even in digital form, to go through and navigate and decide, this was an important, sort of measurement. This one was, because your anxiety was level because of that nephew that had the car accident.
Mm.
This anxiety was high because you weren't eating, right? Those are two very different situations.
Right.
So what we can do is we can use the natural language processing that's coming out of all the AI tooling to
Yes.
help distill that information down and to sort of identify it in a more concise manner. So I can take
Yeah.
3 weeks of journal observations, 3 weeks of symptom, observations, correlate that, and build a summary
Yeah.
that's very concise for physicians to look at, or nurse navigators
Yeah.
to look
Yeah.
at. And that's where, sort of the AI tooling comes in. It's not so much AI for diagnostic purposes.
Right. Yeah.
It's using AI, and the natural language processing that's come out of all of the AI investment to be able to do intelligent, sort of summarization. So a patient can bring that in, and now you're having a much more informed conversation with your physician about what's going on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's another great usage of AI for sure.
Yeah.
That's the topic that everyone is talking about. But
Well,
uh,
and I actually, I mean, on that, the platform continues to evolve, and we actually have this really, I mean, you can see the excitement. I'm bubbling about to talk about it. It's I love using AI as a tool. Like, we're not building an AI model for medical diagnosis. It's not, that's not the direction of our
yeah.
company, at least not yet. But what we are doing is, taking that same notion of being able to do, sort of summarization with all those journal entries and all of
Hmm.
your symptom observations. Well, what if we took the same approach to, your appointments?
Mm.
So, you're talking about your sister, she's, far away. You're
Yes.
not there to participate, but you have questions. Now, she could go to an appointment and then you could ask her what those questions are and, sort of throw that on her. But wouldn't it be great if you could just contribute into a pool of questions, you and other family members who
Mm.
all want to kind of know what's going on, and maybe, you have really good questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the platform allows us to build that queue of questions before an appointment. You can see the appointments that are coming up. It's a radiation treatment appointment, or it's a planning appointment, a nutritionist appointment.
Right.
I can put my questions in along with my other family members. And then during the appointment, we use, text or voice to text transcription.
Hmm.
So we can get a transcription very similar to a lot of, sort of the meeting recording AI tools today. So we can
Yeah.
get that transcription. And
Yeah.
then what's cool is that live and in real time, as that appointment is happening, we've got this list of questions and we can interrogate them,
Mm.
and say, have we got the answers to these things yet? So
Right.
that before you leave the appointment, you make sure that all the questions that you had get answered.
Mm. Hmm.
And now that we've got the answers, again, we're back to that digital record.
Yeah.
Now I can share that, right? So, with that family member that's across the country, wasn't able to come into the appointment, or
Yeah.
maybe even my spouse who had to work, and so I went to the appointment alone. Not only do I have the notes from the appointment, but I actually have these concise answers to the questions that I had
Yeah.
queued up.
Yeah. So much more transparency and easy of that process. Right now, we have a WhatsApp group,
Yeah,
and it's more my brother-in-law
yeah,
getting everyone updated. So it's there,
yes.
but it's a much more about, okay, it's not to the level of that you're describing. Absolutely.
No, and that's what people are doing today, right? Is that everybody is kind of coming up with their own ad hoc, sort of approach to doing
Right.
this. Whether
Right.
it's a shared Google Calendar so that everybody can see the appointments that are going on,
Yeah.
but it's that notion of insight more than just an awareness. It's that insight, right? Because in your WhatsApp group, you don't really have a spot to queue up those questions for a particular appointment, right?
Yeah.
You just have a spot where you can share information, which
Yeah.
is super valuable because you need to have that, that support network. But
Mhm.
it's also not necessarily in the control of your sister who's, the patient. She doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have the ability to drive the journey of the rest of the family.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very challenging time for people, and when we are building products, we always want to, talk with users, follow the users, get them to try the applications. Did you have any challenges getting people to try it because they were so stressed, or because it's not really what they would like to do? They would like to be
It,
healthy, right?
absolutely. And actually, so we've talked to a lot of patients, we talked to a lot of physicians, because it is a bit of a, from my perspective, my, previous history was, I worked at, a software company doing embedded operating system software. So we were in the middle of the stack. Then
Hmm.
I started my own company and I bootstrapped that with two other co-founders, and we ran that for 15 years. And it was embedded user interface, graphics, and but still middle of the stack.
Hmm.
Here, this is a product that is end user facing,
Yeah.
and so our clients are not sort of going on and building their own products. Our clients are actually using our product,
Yes.
but our clients are patients and
Hmm.
physicians and
Hmm.
nurses and administrators. And the people who use the product are not necessarily the people who we think ultimately we want to buy the product, because you don't want to put another burden on a patient.
Right.
So keeping the, sort of the patient engaged has always been our focus in terms of how we want to drive the development of the platform.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, if the patient's not engaged, we don't get data, and there's no value out, down the rest of the chain, right?
Hmm.
So we, even though the patient's not they're our user, they're not our buyer.
Yes.
So we focus on them and their experience, and there's a lot of good techniques for, sort of keeping people engaged. You see this all the time. It could just be because you're a cancer patient and your oncologist has said go do this.
Hmm.
You have so much sort of anxiety that you just follow the rules because you're told to follow the rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's so much going on that it's easy to forget something.
Yeah.
So Then you have, sort of your traditional, kind of nag systems. Yes, we can do that. It's a digital platform and we can nag you, but that's not very effective. It doesn't get you doing something that is not something you want to do, right? Which is what
Hmm.
you were
Hmm.
asking.
Yeah.
So, one, we keep it short. Our engagement is really this 20-second a day build a daily habit, right? That's
Right.
the first thing for us.
Right.
We need to get you into that daily habit. And how do we entice you into that daily habit? Well, we could use some of the game theories and we could say, you're on a streak. You've done it for 5 days. Here's a badge.
Hmm.
You know what a cancer patient doesn't need? They don't need another badge. So we've decided to take something which we feel is a much more compelling approach, which is to use the information that they're generating to identify highs and lows. And when
Hmm.
we talk to cancer patients, this was really a theme that came up again and again, which is managing their emotional level, managing, sort of like re-injecting positivity into their day-to-day life
Hmm.
was so important.
Hmm.
So we said, that's great. This is something that we can actually measure as a metric. We're capturing the data,
Yeah.
and we can see when you're not in a positive mood. We can see when your health is trending in a negative sense.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a medical emergency. So it's not necessarily about calling, sort of notifying the physician. This is
Yeah.
just a general trend that you need a positivity boost. And so this is actually a concept we've introduced into the platform called a positivity bucket,
Ah,
where if I'm the patient and I invited you to participate as, one of my supporters, one of the first things that you'll do when you sign into the platform is you'll be asked, can you provide, a positive memory or a story or an image, a little bit of context, that we can draw on later on when that patient is feeling a little bit down.
I see.
And then when that happens, you don't know when it's going to be used. But when it happens and when the patient's, sort of in that negative spiral, we can pull that out and we can present it. And now we can actually offer a connection. And so
Mm,
this is actually something that allows a very personal re-engagement,
yeah.
which is a very different type of approach than we've seen before.
I love that. I really love that because I'm telling my sister, and I'm going back to this because I'm right. It's
Yeah, you're right in the thick of it.
beginning of that experience, and I'm telling her all the time, if you need me, just call me anytime,
Yep.
etc., etc., etc. We have an added value that when people are sleeping over there, we are still awake over here, so she can
Yes.
still use that.
Yeah.
But she may not have the energy for that, or it may not be the right time. And this process that you described, so much better than just gamification and badges. You're right. Who cares about
Yeah.
badges, right? But it's more about bringing them this positive help from their supporters
Yeah.
when they need it, which is so
Yeah.
powerful.
No, and it's hard to outreach. It's not, for a lot of people, it's difficult in the best of circumstances to ask for help.
Yes.
And when you're going through something which is, onerous
Yes.
and very difficult,
Mm,
sometimes you don't know that you're underwater because
yeah.
you always feel like you're underwater.
Yeah.
So the difference, this is where, sort of the physiological data and the, sort of the symptom observations, as we gather this information, from a digital trending perspective, we can identify it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we can sort of, make that call for help or, a nudge in the right direction
Yeah.
to get you to say, yes, I do want to reach out to Masha and ask him for help. Or maybe I just want to have a call. It's not about necessarily a call for assistance. It's just a
Oh,
re-engagement at a personal level.
absolutely. And right now, we are so worried also about her kids, and
Yep.
I'm also worried about her, my brother-in-law, and my parents.
Yep.
So even I can see how this can go into the caregivers and the family, the immediate family, to get how they feel. So for
Yep.
the application to actually ask them for their mood and how they feel about it, and get their positive how did you call that again? The
Our
positive.
positivity bucket.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
get that positivity bucket filled
Yeah.
by the other network around them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
No, and I mean, there's just, again, once you have a little bit of information in the digital format, you can do a lot with it. And if you can start building that social network, this is not, we're not talking about building a huge social network, sort of outside of this. There are lots of cancer survivorship groups. Most oncology programs are tied in with a local community,
Yeah,
sort of oncology social support,
yeah,
organization. So we're not trying to replace those things.
yeah,
What we see is being able to, sort of help you find the information that you need instead of, getting a bunch of alarming information up front.
yeah,
As you encounter a high level of pain, then we can give you the guidance on what to do with that, what to do with that situation.
yeah.
And we can also loop in the support networks that are around you, right? So we have a program tie-in that allows programs to say, well, I'm in Ottawa, so I know that there's an Ottawa Cancer Foundation that's here to support not just the patient as a client, but actually the family of the patient, right? And the
Hmm.
caregivers that are helping to support that patient.
Yeah.
So we can bring all that information together on this platform.
Absolutely, absolutely. You touched before a bit about your background, and I
Yeah.
want to learn from you about this founder journey. So you had a founder journey starting up another company before, but you mentioned it was very different because it was somewhere in the back end or somewhere in the stack, and your
Yeah.
clients were other companies that were building products rather than the direct users. How did that help or didn't help with this experience you have now?
Yeah. So the previous company, Crank Software, was a bootstrapped company, as I mentioned. We were in the embedded space. We did an embedded user interface framework, which actually, puts me well positioned to talk about, sort of engaging users and building a mobile app, and
Hmm.
that experience. Um, but it was middleware, right?
Hmm.
So it was a technology stack that other companies would acquire and incorporate into their products.
Right.
And it was exciting because we worked with a lot of, automotive customers and, sort of consumer products, but it was always the medical customers that I felt were the ones that had the longest roadmaps,
Hmm.
but ultimately the most, sort of rewarding outcomes.
Hmm.
And being a graphics company, they were always the leaders, sort of from a graphics perspective in terms of human interface elements.
Hmm.
So we did that company, and it was successful, and we were acquired ultimately after running it for 15 years, and
Hmm.
I stuck around for an extra year, and then decided that being inside a larger organization really wasn't for me.
Hmm.
Took a couple of years off, you know, and then realized that the problem with being a starter or being a founder is that it makes you a terrible employee
Hmm.
because it's hard to not want to just control your fate, to set direction,
Hmm.
and to really just build something from scratch. So I decided that I was going to start exploring something else, but this time um, an end product, right? And this is where I met Will. Will was, just in the early days of Leynek and was making some pitches around, sort of how to get this platform going.
Hmm.
And Will's background is, sort of medical device sales, and he understands that space really well. I come
Hmm.
from the technology side, so it was a good complement. And I love working with another co-founder, right?
Hmm.
Anyone who's doing, sort of a startup, my recommendation is that it's a hard journey to do alone.
Hmm.
Having somebody else to bounce ideas off of, to sort of share in the highs and the lows, it's really a roller coaster,
Yeah.
is so important. And so yeah, we started in earnest, I would say, kind of about a year, 18 months ago,
Hmm.
on this product, and we worked very effectively as a team, so really moving it forward at a rapid pace.
Hmm. So as a startup founder and a second startup founder, what are the things that you learned that you will not do again, or you will do differently, or you already do differently today?
Well, I will tell you for certain that fundraising is hard.
Hmm.
Um, our first startup, my first startup was bootstrapped. We were lucky enough to be able to do that. And with Leynek, we thought for certain, this is something, especially with the device, that we would go in and we would, sort of VC funding. We had a number of great contacts, but it's a common refrain: too
Mm-hmm.
early, too late. And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard because everybody is interested in a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
And you tend to find yourself constantly pivoting. And what we actually found was it was distracting.
Mm-hmm.
The VC process of, sort of, well, and I won't say just VC, but just the funding, acquisition process
Mm-hmm.
was actually distracting us from moving forward with the product.
Mm-hmm.
So we've retreated out of that a little bit. And, it's empowering when you're able to bring the product to life on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I know a lot of entrepreneurship programs will talk about, this funding route, of how you move forward from one stage to another, pre-seed, seed, it's all about your growth rate, what
Mm-hmm.
you want to achieve, and
Mm-hmm.
what you can do on your own. And in the software space, you can go a very long way without needing outside investment if you've got, sort of a good team.
Mm-hmm.
And you can share equity among that team. So that's something that's often, I think, you don't hear the bootstrap story a lot when you sort of run through various entrepreneurship programs. There's very much a focus on, well, you've got to raise capital,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whether it's an angel or a VC, you raise capital and you run through these stages, and then eventually you build a product somewhere along that path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that hasn't been the process yet for me in the second venture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's worked out so far.
Yeah. You also mentioned Will as your co-founder and that you love to work with partners. How did you find each other? That's always an interesting part because it's hard to find co-founders or good co-founders that you can work well together.
It is, and I won't say that sort of after I left Crank, I took some time, just personal time, and I tried out a number of different companies. For me, I was in a position where I could offer myself as a service, sort of technical advisor,
Mm-hmm.
and just I think you have to try before you buy in the co-founding space. You
Mm-hmm.
have to figure out whether or not the relationship works, and the only way to do that is to actually really spend time together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much about spending time together and saying, on right off the bat, there's got to be some sort of equity story, and I'm looking for compensation. You have to be willing to say, let's just try it out without any commitment,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody can walk away and no hard feelings.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
because then you find two things: are you really passionate about what you're doing?
Right.
Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing as a startup founder, um, you should probably change direction. And then you also find out about the dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a complementary skill set? Are you in competition with one another? Or is it still, there's still some significant remaining gaps in your leadership team? And,
Yeah.
and that's something to be considering as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are great tips over there. And I want to ask you, do you have any other tips for founders listening to this? Any tips can work from your past
Yeah.
experience, from this experience, things to avoid or things to look into.
I, you know, I think every founder that you ever talk to will have tips, and
Hmm.
and they're maybe not tips, but they're life experiences.
Yes.
And whether they apply to your situation or not, like, that's really on you to decide. And that's really kind of the thing that I would say, it has to be firm in your brain.
Hmm.
There is an enormous amount of advice out there, on how you should start your business, run your business, organize your business, get funding or not get funding, or seek revenue. Consider all of the advice, but consider it as advice, and ultimately make your own decision. There is a massive amount of humility that's required as a founder,
Hmm.
because you're going to make mistakes,
Hmm.
and you're going to have to kind of course correct, and knowing when to be stubborn and stay the course and say, yes, my vision is complete. People just don't share in it yet, but we're going to get them there. Versus, you know what, we don't have the traction and we've been trying long enough. We need to think about pivoting. We need to think about pivoting, and maybe this isn't a going concern. Maybe this won't actually work. So I guess I'm not sure that's advice for other founders as much as it's perspective. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Thomas. I really appreciate you doing what you're doing. And I can see how this can help so many people. So please continue doing that.
Fantastic. Well, it was great talking with you today. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us on the show. And we'll be watching Leynek Medical and, so see where you're going.
Yeah. And ReneCare app is available for iOS and Android today on the app stores. So if you're a cancer patient or you're connected to someone who is affected by cancer, this is something that's available to them today as a resource that they can use.
Yes. Is it in a specific countries?
Nope. It's available worldwide.
Oh, it's worldwide. Amazing. Yeah. So I will definitely let my family know about it. And everyone else, if this is affecting you right now, or someone that is affecting them, please let them know about it and see if this will be helpful for them. It is free to use by the patients, right?
It has a 30-day trial on it, and then it's a nominal $10 a month for really the administrative back-end costs.
Okay, yeah, that should be very doable for most people. Yeah. Amazing. So if people want to reach out to you, we will include the contact information in the podcast description. What would be one thing that you would want them to reach out for, or your ask?
Anything, really. I mean, if you're starting a company and you're, sort of wondering about technical direction, mobile devices, embedded software, medical spaces, funding, adventures, like all those things are things that you're going to encounter. And so I'm happy to talk with anybody about all those things. Lots of opportunity to share.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Thomas.
Great.
So this was another episode of Beyond Product. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky. Please join us again. Also give us reviews. We always appreciate that. And I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.